ABC Wednesdays. Tim Allen and Kat Dennings star in the new family comedy Shifting Gears.
Dad, I'm broke and I need a place to stay until I figure out what the rest of my life looks like.
So, a couple of days.
When his daughter moves back in.
The last time you walked out that door, you looked back at me and gave me a double bird.
I was 18. The double bird was how I ended all our conversations.
The wheels come off.
Can we try to talk to each other like rational adults?
Have you watched the news lately? That's not a thing anymore.
New Wednesdays, 8, 7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Put educational improvement on your New Year's resolution list. IXL makes learning fun through engaging video lessons and interactive problems that adapt to your child's learning pace. Plus, with the app, kids can learn on the go, and one subscription covers all your children's educational needs. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And our listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/20. Visit IXL.com/20 to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a spiritual leader's followers continue to die after putting her in their wills. We'll talk about the podcast Scary Terri from Sony Music Entertainment. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Am I in your will, Kevin?
Yes, actually. Well, we have, yes.
Yes?
We have gotten to the point where we decided we need to do our estate
Well,
planning.
we finally did it. We should have done it like 20 years ago. We finally did it. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's never too late if you're still alive.
That's right. That's right.
So, anyway, do not try to manipulate us.
No.
Because, I mean,
We're locked in.
We're locked into other people getting the money, guys. So.
Yeah, all the money. All the millions of dollars that we have to pass down.
Yes. By the way, I also did have a will when I was 7 years old. So,
okay.
I was a target. Anyway.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. In my will, I will leave you my hot pink ski pants.
I really want those, so thank you. I actually want the link where you got them because I want a pair, like real bad. They're real cute.
I'll put them in our Amazon storefront because that is exactly where I got them, and they were a good deal.
Yeah, they're super cute. And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Thursday's program.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up on Monday's show?
On Monday's show, we're going to talk about the podcast from BBC Sounds. It's called Assume Nothing, A Deadly Diagnosis.
Hey, can I tell our friends here on the podcast something interesting?
Sure.
I'm going to be a mother-in-law.
Yes.
My son Henry got engaged.
No way.
Yes. Yes. And it's public, so I can fucking talk about it. I'm going to be...
Although I think this might be how Livy Burdett is finding out by doing
I'm sure
the raw
her
tape.
parents told her.
Yeah.
Yes, my son got engaged to his they're young, but I don't care because they've been together forever.
They're a lovely couple.
They've been together since they were 15 and they've known each other since they were 3. And they've been through a lot together. They're awesome. My daughter-in-law, my future daughter-in-law's name is Maya. Kevin, you're going to be an in-law as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that wild? One of my kids is starting their own family. Isn't that strange?
Yes.
Yes.
But also, like, they're just so lovely. And whenever we come visit you guys, they're like making these amazing cakes and things. And they do these little cooking things. And I'm like, oh, they're so cute together.
They're quality people.
They're quality people. Yeah. So I'm going to study up on how to be a really shitty mother-in-law. If anybody has any tips, send them my way.
I'm sure that will come natural to you.
Oh, stop it. I actually know what not to do because I had a really terrible mother-in-law for a period of time. And even my ex-husband would agree, I think, that she was a piece of work. Anyway, I just wanted to share the good news. I'm very excited for our family. It's going to be an interesting time in the next year or so as they plan their nuptials.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I have an idea for a new Patreon level.
The wedding planning Patreon level?
Wait, yeah.
Join the open bar level.
This
$7 a month.
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to pay for that. Henry doesn't drink, so he's like, I'm not paying for that. I'm like, yeah, you're not having a dry wedding, my friend. So we'll cover that. All right. Well, I think we should talk about the thing we're talking about. It's way more interesting than the best news that's happened in our family in years. Isn't it, Kevin?
Nothing can top that, but
all right.
This podcast will try.
It'll try.
It will try, but it will not succeed.
Let's get into it. Leading off.
I handed the phone over to Chuck, and the next thing I remember hearing was, and he sat bolt right up in bed and said, "What do you mean she's missing?"
In 1979, a teenage girl drowned while vacationing in Hawaii. Months later, her distraught mother drove her car off a cliff with her nanny in the passenger seat. In each case, the beneficiary of their wills was Terri Lee Hoffman, the leader of a Dallas-based spiritual group.
And she would say just enough to that vulnerable part of every human being in the room wanting to know more. She was so skillful.
Over the next 10 years, a dozen people in Terri's orbit died by suicide or accident, including 2 who believed they had terminal illnesses, but didn't. Several left Terri their assets, and for years, family members have suspected the spiritual leader may have used her powers of persuasion to cause the deaths.
I had no idea what kind of madness, carnage, and darkness I'd find there. I also didn't think I'd stumble across another Charlie Manson.
From Sony Music Entertainment comes Scary Terri. Host Jonathan Hirsch revisits the deaths and attempts to answer whether she manipulated her devotees into taking deadly action. He also tries to follow the money that disappeared when Terri claimed she was bankrupt. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Scary Terri. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Laura, this podcast is pretty scary, huh?
It's so scary. You know what the scariest thing in this podcast is?
What's that?
Looking at her face on that podcast art. I was like, I wouldn't join her freaking cult.
Yeah.
She had a scary look about her.
Yeah. So Toby, can we talk about the pros in this podcast?
Yeah. So there's 2 things. One is it's hard to write well. So if you're not going to really nail it, you don't have to have like these high flying metaphors or whatever in podcasting. You can just write for the voice and you can just tell a story, which he does sometimes and not other times. But there's some rough stuff. And it started like right off the bat. Within the first 5 minutes, he says that they went to a beach and that the beach was actually more like a lagoon. Well, it's like 100% it was not. Like a beach is like land with a whole bunch of sand on it. And a lagoon is a body of water. So nobody's confusing a beach and a lagoon. Those are just 2 completely different things.
Can I just interrupt you and give you my favorite sample of writing from the podcast?
I have one too.
I've got a whole bunch.
It's the opening of episode 5. Okay. People talk about the Texas sky. It's big, grand, but there's more to it
than that. There's a sense of perspective, awe even, that holds its lovers captive. And under that wide canvas, the human drama plays out, small and terrifying below.
Really? That's a great, another example of the writing. But Toby, as you were saying, it took you out of being able to follow the story?
It did a little bit because I stopped taking notes, but very early on, he describes kite surfers as being like disembodied souls.
Oh.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
They're just kite surfers.
And then he had like these sort of weird, I guess, mannerisms when he spoke. Like sometimes he'd be like whispering stuff. Like at one point they're talking about maybe this one family had been given psychedelic drugs and that had explained like their perceptions of things. But he whispers when he starts talking about the psychedelic drugs.
Because we shouldn't talk about drugs, Toby.
Are there any drug users around here? Let's just be super quiet so we don't offend them.
Nobody's listening in on you except for however many people are listening to this podcast. So I have to say, when this thing was over, I was like, all right, what exactly happened? And I think part of it is I was just kept getting distracted by some of the writing and the way things were described that I was kind of losing track of what was actually happening because the story itself is pretty weird.
Laura, what was your example of the writing that you wanted to share?
So when they were describing one of the couples, it's like Chuck and Gail were the perfect match, an all-American couple.
Chuck was tall and muscular with a gentle smile and wavy brown hair. Played college basketball. Worked in commercial real estate. Gail had fine blonde hair, high cheekbones, a model.
I'm like, ugh, I didn't feel any connection to those characters based on the way that they were described. I was like, they could be anybody picked off the generic Hallmark channel with that description.
Yeah. Speaking of the way people are described, Kevin, you have a really great note that I also noticed about people in the podcast describing Terri.
Yeah, I mean, they keep bringing up her looks and making veiled references to her weight and stuff. I mean, the thing that they're trying not to say is they think she's fat and middle-aged and not attractive, and there's no way that she could seduce anybody. I mean, I think that's what they're getting at, right?
Well, did you hear her talk about sex, Kevin?
Well, okay. All right. Right. So, because there is no, like, smoking gun, bloody knife, right? The crime ends up being, we're forced to kind of contemplate, okay, did she manipulate people and how? And one of the obvious ways that we normally would think of, if I told you nothing about the podcast or the people involved and said it was a woman, one of the first things most people would wonder is like, was she a femme fatale? Did she use sex to get what she wanted?
She did.
And in order to say, like, okay, our working theory is that no, that wasn't what it was. And the way they're trying to demonstrate that or say that is by getting you to understand that she wasn't attractive.
Yes.
And I just wish, like, I absolutely get sort of why you might want to somehow make that point that, okay, a lot's going on. It's not that. It could be one of these other things, but it just seemed like a really awkward way of sort of telegraphing that. It just, as an unattractive middle-aged person myself, I don't need a bunch of people like pointing out that like it's possible that it was, Anyway,
but Kevin, as the person married to you, A, that's not true, but B, unattractive middle-aged people also fuck. I mean, it's not like,
and we hear about that.
It's not like an activity reserved for the attractive. That's ridiculous. But as you pointed out, Kevin,
there's that ugly fucking going on.
We just turn the lights off.
That's right. That's what Spanx are for. So that's the thing. You pointed out, Kevin, that there's no smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
No shit. The only evidence of a crime being committed here is people telling us a crime was committed here, right?
Yeah.
It's just like people saying what they think happened. And
there was a murder-suicide, but
not committed by Terri.
Not committed by Terri. No. That would have been the end of the podcast.
That's right. That's right. And we don't even get, we have this old audio of her, which almost completely has nothing to do with what we're being told about her. We're hearing she's this charismatic religious leader, and then we don't hear her being charismatic or particularly religious on any of these tapes.
Terri Hoffman is often heard on the tapes, suggesting she has no influence over anyone, least of all Sandra.
Did she ask your advice concerning the divorce?
No.
Not directly?
No.
And it's just boring, like, audio. The audio of the deposition is just her taking the fifth over, and it's just nothing there. Laura, what did you think of, like, sort of our sense of the Terri story that we get in this podcast?
Yeah, like you said, we get it from other people after the fact. Everybody's like, well, she did this, and then she did that, and then they put her in their will, and then they died. And she definitely had a lot of husbands there. But I, first of all, couldn't understand the recordings that they had of her. They were too muffled for me to hear, so I didn't really get much context, if any, from those being included in this. I think it was like, hey, cool, look, we found these recordings from like the 70s that we still have. Amazing. We're going to use them. But for me, I was like, I can't distinguish her voice well enough to get a sense of her from those.
Yeah.
Except there was that one where she, like I said, she was talking about like her sexual escapades and how much sex she was having, and twice on the weekends. I was like, ooh.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's what's
Terri.
scary.
It's a lot for a
That's what's scary
person.
is twice on the weekends.
Yeah.
Twice on Monday would be even more scary.
And for any of you who wants to at me, I am a fucking middle-aged person, so I know what I'm talking about. That is a lot for a middle-aged person, in my opinion.
Unfortunately.
So, Toby, something that we're going to say, Toby.
Well, I was just going to say that I think this idea of being hot and being like charismatic in a way like a movie star would be, I think it's just like not the way to think about cult leaders. Because you think about like Heaven's Gate.
Or Keith Raniere at Nexium.
Well, he had a little something going on.
You see him play volleyball in those shorts?
Did you see him jump over that person that one time? Or did you get the best angle on that while the person was lying down?
Love a greasy ponytail.
But like the Heaven's Gate, like they were explicitly asexual, and they're sort of these monotone speakers and stuff. But what they did have that their followers responded to was that they had this like kind of knowledge that they were able to express in a way that was compelling to the people who followed them. And you don't get a sense of that.
Like, what sense do we get, Toby, of the actual religion or the actual cult?
You get very little. Like, it's basically like the Dark Lords. There's like some battle between the forces of light and the Dark Lords and stuff. But it's
rip off Scientology, right?
I guess. I mean, I don't know where the hell the Dark Lord. I thought it was like some kind of like maybe they'd read The Hobbit or something.
But she's Jesus Christ now, so
yeah, Jesus and the Hobbits. But the thing is that you have to read into it, right? It's not provided to you. I mean, it's essentially a bunch of things that have happened and the connection between all these different things. So all these people had some kind of relationship with Terri and her cult. And is the correlation, does that like point to some kind of causation, some like similarity of how they met their fates or had misfortune fall upon them? Or is it just kind of like, you don't even know how many people, like, was this like her entire following had this stuff happen to them? Or were there like dozens of other people who just like went about their lives? And these are just a few little things that happened that are inevitably going to happen if you have a whole bunch of people. Some people are going to have tragic circumstances. But you just don't know.
Well, there was one person who I thought was particularly interesting. It was that guy, Don, who she ends up marrying. And Don is like out in the garage, like making shields and swords and weapons to fight off the Dark Lords. And he had like this workshop and he's out there soldering piping into shapes. And like, he's going to fight the evils of the world. And I'm like, this is wild. Like, are we waiting for like winter is coming and Game of Thrones? Like, what's happening here?
She just wanted him out of the house. I swear to God, it's just like, go get that solder going.
Get a hobby.
Get a hobby like listening to exclusive podcasts on Patreon.
Just like that.
Go to patreon.com/partners in crime media.
It's the business section.
And you'll get all sorts of great stuff that we have there. Exclusive podcast, more than 700 exclusive podcasts. You can get the Crime Writers on After Show, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Married with Podcast. We got an episode coming up. Person's got a question about she got friend zoned. Should she go for it anyway?
No.
We'll find out.
End of episode.
The Karen Reed Readathon and Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. And if you'd like to figure out whether you want to join us on Patreon, try 7 days for free. That's all you have to do. And one bit of advice we're letting you know, if you're going to join on Patreon, we suggest that you don't use the app on your iPhone to do it because Apple will add another 30% to your bill. If you joined recently and you notice that like you joined at the $5 level, but that's not what you're paying, that's why. So
should the people quit and then rejoin?
I think you probably should quit and rejoin.
Yeah.
And by rejoining, we say use a laptop or another web browser or use your Android app. So
use your web browser on your phone instead of the app, instead of the Patreon app.
Okay.
Yeah, that should hopefully save you money. Another great thing you can do to support us and save yourself some money is get a great deal on your shopping at Amazon. You go to our Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things. Now, Laura's going to put out her pink ski pants in the store. Rebecca, what is your Amazon recommendation for the week?
My new recommendation is a hot hair styling tool. I had this very expensive hot brush that just started to not work as well. So I was like, I got to replace this. And I was going to replace it with the same kind. And then I was like, I'm going to look around and see if I can find something.
It started to smell bad.
Yeah.
It smelled like Noble.
Yeah. And I found this great one for $35 on Amazon. And it's cute, too, because it comes in like this black and rose gold color. It comes in multiple colors. But yeah, it works great. It's got multiple settings. It's from Tress's Touch. It was $35.99. It's freaking awesome. And I'm never going to buy an expensive one again. Thanks, Amazon.
And Toby, what are your listener-inspired Toby Balls Deep Cut recommendations?
Well, I'm going to start off with a little culinary thing. Field roast smoked tomato plant-based deli slices. 5.5 ounces. Not sure what the hell that is.
No shade to vegetarians, but that shit sounds nasty.
Yeah, well, maybe you can post on the Facebook book group what that is. And then this is becoming sort of a weekly theme. The Backyard Chicken Keeper's Bible.
Ooh.
Discover chicken breeds, behavior, coops or co-ops, not sure which, eggs, and more.
Oh, man, that's great. So what you should do is shop us first at amazon.com/shop/crime-writers-on. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
You could buy other stuff that you're going to buy on Amazon anyway, and you'll be supporting the show, right, Kevin?
Yeah, it doesn't add a nickel to your bill, but it does help us keep things going, like the open bar at Henry's eventual wedding.
That's right. It's going to help us pay for these nuptials, and also to make this podcast. That's actually what we're paying for. All right, Kevin, before we end the business section, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Alyssa Davis and Lauren Voigt. Bless you.
Alyssa, Lauren, thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. Thanks to everybody.
Long-time patrons.
Long time. Thanks to everybody who supports us there. And thanks to everybody who listens to the business section and chooses not to anyway, because you're listening to the podcast and you matter. That being said, though, I'd consider joining our Patreon because it's rad. Kevin, does that end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. Kevin, who's our next sponsor for this podcast?
Oh, we're brought to you by HelloFresh.
HelloFresh.
Tired of figuring out what's for dinner night after night?
Yes.
Especially on those busy weekdays?
Yes.
Get dinner done an easier way thanks to HelloFresh.
HelloFresh.
Now, look, I think that, you can sell a product on a lot of different points. We could talk about the quality of the food, the price point. Let me just talk about convenience for a second.
Do it.
Okay. There's a lot of us that when we do takeout, we're going to get pizza or get something from the Chinese restaurant. We're doing that not because we've been looking forward all day to that restaurant.
Right.
We've been doing it because
we're tired.
5 or 6 o'clock comes around and you haven't thought about it. And so you're looking for something convenient.
Correct.
You're willing to spend a couple of bucks for that convenience so somebody
More
can
than
bring...
a couple.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we get Chinese food...
It's like $100. Wow.
So I'm offering you something that is both convenient and at a great price point. It's HelloFresh. It's easy to find time to eat well. They have 50 wholesome, hassle-free meals, so you got a lot to choose from. And HelloFresh's new ready-made meals, they go from the fridge to your fork in just 3 minutes.
Amazing. So get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
CWO10FM.
One item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/CWO10FM.
CWO10FM.
FM for free meals.
ABC Wednesdays. Tim Allen and Kat Dennings star in the new family comedy Shifting Gears.
Dad, I'm broke and I need a place to stay until I figure out what the rest of my life looks like.
So, a couple of days.
When his daughter moves back in,
The last time you walked out that door, you looked back at me and gave me a double bird.
I was 18. The double bird was how I ended all our conversations.
the wheels come off.
Can we try to talk to each other like rational adults?
Have you watched the news lately? That's not a thing anymore.
New Wednesdays, 8, 7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
So, Kevin, this show left you cold?
Yeah, but the winter clothes at Quince will never leave you cold.
Nice.
Did you not get what you wanted for Christmas?
I got
No,
a
I'm
lot
not
of
asking
it.
you.
Oh.
I'm not asking you. I'm
Oh.
talking to the listener.
Oh, okay.
Did you not get what you wanted for Christmas?
They didn't.
Nor did you not get what you wanted for your December birthday, where everybody just gives you a gift and says this is for both? What a ripoff, right?
Lame.
Super lame. All right, well,
Here's one shoe for your birthday, another shoe for Christmas.
I like how that works. Yeah. One glove. Yeah. Treat yourself to a little something without spending a fortune with Quince. So all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands because they partner directly with top factories and cut out the middleman.
Oh, yeah.
Passing the savings on to you. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. Rebecca, I know that you are the unofficial ambassador of Quince
That's
to
right.
the world.
And I did some Christmas shopping there. Want to hear what I got?
Yeah, tell us
I mean,
about
you
it.
saw.
Mhm.
I gave your daughter an incredible faux fur jacket. I have the same one, a
Mhm.
white, super fuzzy one. It's amazing. And I gave one of our kids a cashmere fisherman sweater from Quince. It's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
That will definitely keep them warm. So treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/crime for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
So I have a thought regarding the lack of smoking gun that I just want to get off my chest, okay? So I'm not saying that she didn't do bad shit. At the end, we do get evidence that she committed these financial crimes, right? I'm not saying that she didn't encourage people to do the things they did, but also I don't know. And she was never arrested or convicted for those things. So I'm not comfortable being like, oh, because the podcast host told me so, that's what happened. The other thing that we get is one of the strongest pieces of evidence, allegedly, that she was like a black widow who like brought people in and then made them die so she'd get their money, is a tape of a message that a guy leaves telling his family that he's dying and that he's going to leave all his money to her. That didn't sound to me like he was coerced. It sounded like these are the choices that he made. But that's the proof we're given. The proof we're given is this guy voluntarily doing these things that apparently she was like. But
I think the implication might be that she led him to believe he had a terminal illness that he didn't have.
But the proof of that is the tape of him saying that I'm sick and I want to give her my money. We don't know what he was thinking. You know what I mean? Like,
well, no, okay. You're putting me in the position of defending all of this,
Okay.
but I think that my understanding of the story is this tape demonstrates the fact that he thought he was dying.
Or he said he thought he was dying.
Isn't that the same thing? He said he was dying.
Okay.
I went to the doctor when I got back, and he ran some tests and found that I had terminal non-operable cancer. I wasn't too thrilled about that.
But he was not dying.
Mm-hmm.
So something is not right about that.
Right.
And so what they do say is that there's a lot of smoke. And it's true. It's an interesting story. There is a lot of smoke, but nobody's ever been able to find any fire.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, the case is interesting. You've got a lot to work with. You've got 12 deaths. But I just can't put my finger on why this wasn't more engaging of a podcast. It was very kind of slow paced. But
At the beginning, he tells us it's Charles Manson, and it's not.
That was a big
swing.
It's a big swing to say, is this a Charles Manson? But like, I mean, because guys, for most of this podcast, it's not like wildly off from the podcast that we do like. The kind of reporting, we generally like that kind of stuff. It's not the unborn. All the interviews seem to be pretty straight and they kind of get the information. But for some reason, this just doesn't click for me. And I can't figure out why it's not more dynamic and that all of a sudden you're kind of losing focus, Laura.
Yeah, I was the same way, Kevin. I was listening to it and I was like, I listened to this like driving around. I've had a lot of driving lately and I'm like, I'm getting all my podcast homework done. And I was like zoning out. And I think it's because there was no suspense for me. There was nothing that was making me feel like, ooh, what's going to happen next? Ooh, what's going to happen? And I don't want to like diminish the experience of the people involved, but I was like, this is a story we've heard before. We're like, we've got this lady. She's got this weird sort of religion, sort of new agey sort of thing she's doing. They're meeting in people's houses. They're talking about people with evil blood, whatever. And then everybody's telling the same story about her. So once you've heard it like 3 times, for me, I just start to tune out. I'm like, oh, somebody else died and left things to her in her will. And not to say that that's not bad, but I'm also just like, it wasn't new, so it didn't hold my attention in a way that made me actually follow the story as it was going. It was repetitive.
Yeah, the only detail that really stuck out to me, Toby, and you made note of this too, was that Devereaux, the girl who drowns in Hawaii, she had a will and she was like 13 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the things that would indicate that Terri was manipulating people is that she decided that she had to make a will to leave her trust fund to somebody. And instead of doing what I would assume most 13-year-olds would do, would either be to leave it to your parents or to like
a pony
Taylor
farm.
Swift or somebody.
Pony farm.
She wants to leave it to Terri. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think part of it also was that you never had any sense of who any of these people were. They were just names of people and people who they're related to or whatever. But when we're talking about Sons of Ecstasy, for all its faults, like you knew who those people were.
Yeah.
And in this, I just didn't feel like I had much of a sense. I couldn't tell you now, like, were these people like religious people to start off with? And then they got kind of sucked into this. Were they not religious? Were they well off? Were they poor? Were they middle class? You don't know anything about them other than their names and some sort of...
You know their names? Good on you, because I don't fucking know anybody's name.
Well, they keep saying them. But again, because you don't know who they are, it's like, you know, there's Rick and there's Jim or whatever. And it's just like, okay, wait, who is he? Was he married to her? Or it just... In the end, they just kind of felt like stick figures kind of moving around and having things happen to them. But it's not even that you can't identify with them, is you can't identify them.
Yes.
So it's just like, oh, I guess that happened.
Yeah, I mean, everything does kind of blend together. I mean, Laura makes a good point. And when I say I can't remember anybody's names, it's because all the stories are the same. The only name I remember is Terry and Devereaux because it was such an unusual name that everybody else was like, oh, who's that? And everyone also sounded the same. All the interviews sounded like, are we just interviewing one person for this whole podcast? Because that's what it sounds like to me. I mean, just lots of conjecture, lots of repetitive stuff. Lots of writing that just long passages of narration sort of got in the way of any of the action.
Well, don't you remember the part about the guy with the brown underwear? That's the one part I remember that I wish I had never heard.
What about the guy with the brown underwear didn't you like, Laura? Do you want to just remind our audience what it is if they haven't heard it?
Yeah, so there's this one part where this guy's like, oh, I'm going to tell you a story, but it's a little bit dirty or a little nasty. And he starts talking about Terry giving massages. So I'm like, oh, Terry was giving happy endings. I'm thinking, okay. He starts talking about her giving this guy a massage and how he takes off his clothes in the living room and had a brown stain on the back of his underwear. And I'm like, ew. Why did that need to be included?
Off comes his pants and he's got a big brown spot on the back of his underwear. So like he shit himself.
That did not contribute to the story. Unfortunately, it's one of the only things I remember about this story because I was just
it added color.
Yeah, brown
I mean, even if the color's brown, yeah.
The only other thing I remember was the story about the kids that were having a sleepover with Devereaux who snuck to the top of the stairs to eavesdrop on their little meeting downstairs. And we're like, oh shit, when they heard them talking about people having evil blood and bloodletting. And they're like, we're not going to her house again.
Yeah. So, Kevin, there is an interesting detail that the host puts out there and never really gets into. Is that he grew up in a cult? And it kind of comes up.
That made me say, wait, what?
And I'm like, why don't you tell us about it? Maybe that would give us some insight into why you're interested in this story. Did you find that there was just some missing pieces like that too?
Yeah, I mean, the host seems nice enough. And, we talked about his turns of phrases aren't always very smooth or whatever. Some of you have more issues with that than I do. Again, I thought if I were his boss, I would tell him the news gathering seems to be kind of pretty fine. And if I had stopped listening to this podcast 25 minutes into it and you asked me well, what do you think the rest of it's going to be like? I would probably say it's pretty straightforward and it's Scary Terry title doesn't really do it any favors. It's kind of like Candyman, right?
Yeah.
But the host, he's not a huge presence in the podcast. And I think that's one of the reasons why this isn't more dynamic, or I don't know if it's a pacing thing. I just really wish that I could say for certain, the problem is X. And if they had just done that, but for some reason, I just can't, I don't know what it is about this podcast. It just seemed to have a lot of the elements to start to be a really good podcast story. But I don't know. It came out a little half baked.
I think it's the writing and not on a sentence by sentence basis, but I think in something like this, you've really got to make the case because it's not obvious, right? And so I think it would have been a lot better if he was like, this is some fucked up stuff that happened, and I'm going to show how it was a product of this woman and her manipulation of people or whatever, and then have that as kind of an organizing principle so that you're kind of know what's going on or whatever. This sort of, I mean, it's somewhat told chronologically, although it starts somewhere where I don't know exactly where that fits in the timeline, them going and drowning off a raft in a lagoon or a beach or whatever it was.
Lagoon Beach.
The Lagoon Beach.
A lagoon with an undertow.
I just kind of feel if there had been a question that they could have organized this around, that it would have been a little bit easier to follow because you would have been okay, how does this fit into it? How does this fit into it? And there would be some kind of reason for these things. I just kind of found it was these sort of barely differentiated stories again and again and again. And I wasn't keeping track. So maybe it affected me more than it actually was there. But it seemed there's a lot of value laden words twisted and evil that get thrown out there in lieu of actual evidence. Or some reason to believe it. And then there's just this weird, I think he's trying to create an atmosphere of dread or fear or paranoia. That whole thing with the kite surfers being disembodied souls. He also at one point has this weird thing about somebody gets cremated and they want to put the ashes on the top shelf of this, whatever it is that they're putting the ashes. And he says that the reason why they put it on the top level was so that no one would steal them like a sick trophy.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm like,
I
what?
forgot that.
What? Somebody's going to go in and steal somebody's ashes?
Yeah, I think putting them up high is not the best security
like,
system if someone
yeah.
really wants to steal those.
Oh, God damn it. I wanted to get it, but it's too high.
Yeah.
The Dark Lords will never look for him there.
Can I just point out, with regard to the lack of interestingness of this podcast, the climactic scenes were in bankruptcy court. Nothing is more interesting or more exciting or more suspenseful than listening to tape from bankruptcy court.
Well, I tell you, that's the only part of the podcast where I could kind of get a little handhold on as far as like the story. They bring in some other different people here. For whatever reason, because there was sound and a couple of different voices, and you can kind of get around because what happened to the money is something that could be discerned. It's discernible whether or not we get there or not. And, props to Jonathan for trying to track that down after all this time and advance the story a little bit. But the idea of she talked people into committing suicide or driving off a cliff or somehow dying. It's there's no way to prove that. And so a lot of the podcasts that end up going wrong for us are ones where they're posing a question that is not answerable. And then we go through it and they don't answer it. And somehow we're surprised that it doesn't happen.
Hi, I'm Dalvet Quince. One way to help manage type 2 diabetes is to regularly exercise. My exercise program can help get you into a routine that works for you. Keep in mind, managing blood sugar also takes the right
diet. Hi, I'm celebrity chef Franklin Becker. Ever since I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I've adapted my cooking style without sacrificing flavor. If you want to learn more tips about diet
and exercise,
visit mytype2transformation.com.
ABC Wednesdays. Tim Allen and Kat Dennings star in the new family comedy Shifting Gears.
Dad, I'm broke and I need a place to stay until I figure out what the rest of my life looks like.
So, a couple of days.
When his daughter moves back in.
The last time you walked out that door, you looked back at me and gave me a double bird.
I was 18. The double bird was how I ended all our conversations.
The wheels come off.
Can we try to talk to each other like rational adults?
Have you watched the news lately? That's not a thing anymore.
New Wednesdays, 8, 7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Put educational improvement on your New Year's resolution list. IXL makes learning fun through engaging video lessons and interactive problems that adapt to your child's learning pace. Plus, with the app, kids can learn on the go. And one subscription covers all your children's educational needs. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And our listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/20. Visit IXL.com/20 to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
This cold and flu season, Instacart is here to help deliver all of your sick day essentials. Whether you're in prevention mode and need vitamins, hand sanitizer, and that lemon tea your Nana swears by, or you're in healing mode and need medicine, soup, and a lot more tissues. Simply download the Instacart app to get sick day supplies that reinvigorate or relieve delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Excludes restaurant orders. Service fees and terms apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast? Scary Terri. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Scary Terri?
So I struggled with this, what my actual review is going to be here. The story is interesting in a sense. The reporting is solid. They have access to a lot of the people that were involved in this case, which happened in the late 70s. So of course, my first question is, why now? Why are we hearing this story now? Which is something I always say. I think where I struggled with this was the writing didn't connect me to the story in a way that made me want to keep listening. The suspense was almost non-existent. And a lot of the stories that they were telling were so similar that I felt like it would have benefited from some editing so that we could differentiate those stories. And it was something that in the end, I listened to it and I was like, it didn't affect me in a way that I felt like, wow, that was a really fascinating story. So I think I'm going to go mild thumbs down. And the reason I'm not going full thumbs down is because there was solid reporting in this. There was access to the people. They did a good job doing the background. I think it was the packaging is where this story for me didn't connect. So mild thumbs down.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Scary Terri?
Yeah, so I'm afraid I'm just like a normal thumbs down. I agree with Laura in that I think there are pieces there that could have been used to better effect than what there were. I think there's quite a few problems. Like, you don't really get a sense of anybody who these things happen to or have done to them. So it's just names. You're trying to remember, like, who was Rick again? Or is he related to Jeff? And which one's married to Sue? That kind of thing. It's not clear cut exactly what happened or how much they're really exposing of like an attempt at crime or crimes or whatever. They really need to make a case for why this was a sinister series of events. And I think maybe if they had focused on that a little bit more, it may have made it a little easier to follow. I mean, that was really an issue I had. It was just really hard to know exactly what was going on. And there were times when I thought, haven't I heard this before? But it was just because it was just a variation on the same theme. So anyway, if I had been running the studio that put this out, I would have been like, look, can you just go back and like just rethink this and then maybe try again? Because I think there's probably something here, but it's just this product is not it. So thumbs down.
Kevin Flynn.
I guess I'm a mild thumbs down. So issues with the writing aside, some of these podcasts, we judge it on their technical merit or their journalistic effort. And for me, this is just about the vibe, because it never really takes off despite having an interesting source material here. The story is very puzzling, and it's not the first time this has been out in the media. But like when you start off by saying maybe this is a female Charles Manson, there's a lot more that you need to sort of live up to that promise, right? Or even like why you would think that. Because what is considered a crime may not really be a crime at all, or any of these connected events. So not to give it away, I just felt like there was probably a lot there, but it just didn't have the energy to sort of keep my interest, and I wish they would take another run at this. But all in all, I can't say if you had done X, Y, or Z, this would have fixed it. For some reason, I just can't put my finger on it. The total is less than the sum of its parts.
All right. So, Kevin, I'm just going to spoil one thing from our review, which we discussed, which was that there's a lot of discussion in the podcast about the woman's looks and people dancing around it. I just heard a whole bunch of that from you guys. I heard it lacked energy, that it never takes off. The writing is not interesting. It totally lacks suspense. What I hear you guys saying is it's boring. This podcast is boring.
Yeah.
It's so boring. There are only 6 episodes in this podcast. And this is something we say all the time. Like, this doesn't have to be 10. It doesn't have to be 12. And I looked at this. I was like, oh, it's only 6. It must be tight. It's the opposite of tight. It's loose. It's boring. It has what I call the Steve and Dave effect, where when Toby was talking about like, who is this person again? Who's this person again? I swear to God, like my whole thing is like, if I forget a man's name, it's usually Steve or Dave. So it's like, I always think of things where it all kind of muddles up together as the Steve and Dave effect. And this had it like in full display. It is not a particularly interesting story. And if it is, it wasn't told like a particularly interesting story. And that is not to denigrate the host or the people involved in the story or the victims of, the alleged victims of this woman. But yeah, it's just not good. And I'm down for a mid podcast. I'm down for mid media. I like Rizzoli and Isles, for fuck's sakes. I put The Perfect Couple on my top 10 list at the end of the year. Something doesn't have to be great or in the dark for me to give it a thumbs up and be like, people will like this. This just ain't it. It ain't it on any level. So big thumbs down for me for Scary Terry. All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, I have to ask, do we have a cat of the week this week?
Our cat of the week caught my attention because it was actually a ploy for somebody on our Crime Writers on Facebook discussion group to get input on their upcoming trip to New Orleans from our other listeners.
Nice.
However, this really cute black lab dog with his little banana toy is the picture that was on this post. And I was like, first of all, my cats have a catnip banana that they love. And this dog was like super cute, super proud of his little catnip banana. So this came to us from Danielle Jorgensen. And the dog is named Bevo, but like most fur babies, he's got lots of nicknames, and we often call him Sir because he's the most polite doggo ever, which is probably why he hasn't killed his little banana toy yet. Like my cats have killed their catnip banana. So I hope your trip to New Orleans is awesome. I love this dog. This picture, even though I'm not a dog person, I'm like, I would hang with that dog. So Danielle, Thank you.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and pitch their animals, it can be any kind of animal, not even belong to them, to be Cat of the Week. How can they find you online?
They can find me at Laura Bricker on Blue Sky and Instagram.
And Toby, if folks want to reach out to you and agree with you in your assessments of the writing on the podcast that we talk about, how can they find you online?
At Toby Ball NH.
What about you, Kevin? How can you be found?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
You can follow me everywhere at Reb Lavoie. And if you want to follow the show, look for us on the platforms at Crime Writers On. Mostly, I encourage you to join our incredible Facebook group. If you're still on Facebook or have an account on Facebook, we've had people join Facebook so they could join our group. Our group is that awesome. Just find us on Facebook, look for us, and then there's a post on our regular page for how to join the group. I'm telling you, man, those people are good people. Get episodes early and ad-free and all the other stuff we make at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. You'll get all the shows we make plus all of our back catalog. Kevin, how many episodes are back there?
More than 700 episodes.
Wow. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin Flynn. This show is recorded in Studio C, the closet in our basement, where we also make poor choices when it comes to estate planning. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
I have to check my pot pie. Hold on a minute.
Chicken pot pie.
Chicken pot, chicken pot, chicken pot pie. That's an obscure reference. Deep cut.
I have no idea what that is.
From Just Shoot Me. It was, wasn't it, what's his face? Chris, what's his face?
David Cross?
Oh, it was David Cross.
Yeah,
Yes.
All right. Is he the guy who plays Tobias?
Yes.
Yeah,
Chicken
that guy's
pot,
funny.
Chicken pot pie. He's married to Amber Tamblyn.
I know. It's really weird.
Did you know that he was married to Amber Tamblyn? You know what Amber Tamblyn is? She played Emily Quartermain on General Hospital for years. But she's better known because she was Joan in Joan of Arcadia. That's how most people would know her.
Yeah. How about the South Park? No, Kitty, that's my pot pie. My pot pie, Kitty. No.
In crime media.
Hi, I'm Dalvet Quince. One way to help manage type 2 diabetes is to regularly exercise. My exercise program can help get you into a routine that works for you. Keep in mind, managing blood sugar also takes the right
Diet. Hi, I'm celebrity chef Franklin Becker. Ever since I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I've adapted my cooking style without sacrificing flavor. If you want to learn more tips about diet
and exercise,
visit mytype2transformation.com.
Where'd you get those shoes? DSW has all the shoes you need for whatever you're into. You know, like running shoes that give new meaning to personal best. Or everyday sneakers that make coffee runs look cool. Basically, DSW has all the best styles from the brands that always get it right. Like Nike, Brooks, Timberland, and more. Oh yeah, did we mention they also happen to be the perfect price? Find a shoe for every you at your DSW store and DSW.com.